Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Understanding Business, 2024, Chapter 12, narrated by Omar Mohsen Ibrahim Fouad. Chapter 12, Dealing with Employee Management Issues, page 310. Learning Objectives. After you read and study this chapter, you should be able to trace the history of organized labor in the United States, discuss the major legislation affecting labor unions, outline the objectives of labor unions, describe the tactics used by labor and management during conflicts, and discuss the role of unions in the future. Assess some of today's controversial employee management issues, such as executive compensation, pay equity, sexual harassment, child care and elder care, substance use disorders and drug testing, and violence and bullying in the workplace. Page 311. Getting to know Liz Schuler, president of the AFL-CIO, after decades of declining membership in labor unions. Employees at major companies like Starbucks and Amazon have gained lots of attention recently for their efforts to unionize. Along with demanding better pay and benefits, these workers also have concerns about understaffing, unpredictable scheduling, and limited opportunities for advancement. Advocating for these issues is not easy, of course, which is why employees who attempt to organize need all the support they can get. That's where leaders like Liz Schuler come in. As president of the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, AFL-CIO, she represents the interests of more than 12 million active and retired workers. Schuler is a strong advocate for all kinds of unions, displaying her solidarity with employees looking to organize across the country. Recent data shows that workers won 639 union elections in 2022, the highest win total in nearly 20 years, said Schuler. What's notable is that those victories occurred in many different industries, along with praising the heroic organizing efforts at Starbucks and Amazon that have captured our imagination. Schuler also declares that it is her job to demand the rights and democracy on the job that the laws of the United States promise us all. Schuler's dedication to working people comes from her upbringing in a union household. Both of her parents were employed by an electric utility company in Portland, Oregon, where her dad worked as a lineman with good pay and benefits, while her mother was a non-union employee in service and design. Schuler joined the utility company as a clerical worker while she attended the University of Oregon. Only to discover that not all employees earned decent money like her father. When I saw how the power linemen were treated because they were in the union, and then the clerical workers were not in the union, it became really clear to me, up close and personal, what a difference that could make to have a voice on the job, said Schuler. Alarmed by the difference in treatment between Inman and clerical workers, Schuler became committed to making a change at the company. After graduating with a degree in journalism, her first job out of college was working as an organizer for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, the union that represented employees at the utility company. Schuler wanted workers like her mother to have just as many rights as linemen like her father. So she joined an organizing campaign to unionize clerical employees at the company. She and her colleagues knocked on doors and visited workers at their homes to talk about their concerns. But the campaign faced lots of opposition from management. Although the organizing effort did not succeed, the experience taught Schuler what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. Rather than becoming a journalist, she would put all her effort into working as a union activist. In the 1990s, Schuler took a job at the IBEW as a lobbyist, where she quickly faced one of the biggest challenges of her career. A powerful group led by representatives from the energy company Enron had been trying to deregulate the electric utility industry in Oregon, an action that the IBEW opposed vehemently. We knew we could see the handwriting on the wall, that this would mean threats to not only jobs and livelihoods of the workers, but it was a real roller coaster for consumers, said Schuler, because you're used to having reliable, safe electricity. This time her efforts were successful as the IBEW gathered support from consumer activists, farmers, and social justice groups to prevent the takeover from Enron, which collapsed entirely in the early 2000s after committing widespread fraud. Following this big win, Schuler headed to Washington, D.C. to serve as IBEW's international representative in the nation's capital. Her extensive work on union issues caught the eye of Richard Trumka of the AFL-CIO, who in 2009 selected Schuler as his secretary-treasurer during his run for the organization's presidency. By 2022, the AFL-CIO elected Schuler as president of the organization, the first woman in history to occupy the position. As head of one of the most powerful unions in the U.S., Schuler has set a goal to attract 1 million newly organized workers in the coming years. We want every worker who wants a union to have one, said Schuler. Once they take that courageous step forward and begin their organizing drive, unions need to be there for them, answering their questions, helping to negotiate that first contract that would transform their workplace for the better. After all, it's not easy for employees to deal with matters like working conditions, labor management relations, employee compensation, and other work-related issues on their own. This chapter discusses these subjects and other employee management concerns, including executive pay, pay equity, child and elder care, substance use disorders, and drug testing, and bullying and violence in the workplace. Sources: Q&A, AFL-CIO President Liz Schuler, IBEW, IBEW.org. August 8th, 2022. Liz Schuler describes the path forward for the labor movement. AFSCME, AFSCME.org. July 13th, 2022. Mark Trumbull, Labor Unions and Workers, Deeper Quest for Respect. The Christian Science Monitor, csmonitor.com. September 9th, 2022. John Ringer and Meghna Chakrabarty, AFL-CIO. President Liz Schuler, on the future of America's labor movement, WBUR, WBUR.org. April 7th, 2022. Liz Schuler, once essential, then expendable. American workers are transforming the economy. Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, postgazette.com. September 4th, 2022. Liz Schuler, AFL-CIO, AFLCIO.org. Accessed March 2023. Susan Walsh and AP Images, page 312. Name that company. Employees' need for child care is one of the critical issues facing business today. This company has provided 24-hour child care at its plants in Kentucky and Indiana for many years. Name that company. Find the answer in the chapter. Employee management issues. Unfortunately, the relationship between managers and employees isn't always trouble-free. Management's responsibility to produce a profit by maximizing productivity sometimes means making hard decisions, which aren't always popular with employees. Employees have long been concerned about fairness, income equality, and workplace security. Like other managerial challenges, employee management issues require open discussion, goodwill, and compromise. In this chapter, we will look at several key workplace issues that impact the manager's job and workplace environment. Unions, executive compensation, pay equity, sexual harassment, child care, elder care, substance use disorders, and drug testing, and violence and bullying in the workplace. Labor unions yesterday and today. LO 12-1. Trace the history of organized labor in the United States. One of the major issues in employee management relations involves labor unions. Labor, the collective term for non-management workers, is interested in fair and competent management, human dignity, and a reasonable share of wealth its work generates. A union is an employee organization whose main goal is representing its members in employee management negotiations over job-related issues. Workers originally formed unions to protect themselves from intolerable work conditions and unfair treatment, and also to secure some say in the operation of their jobs. As the number of private sector union members grew, workers gained more negotiating power with management and more political power. For example, labor unions were largely responsible for the establishment of minimum wage laws, overtime rules, workers' compensation, severance pay, child labor laws, job safety regulations, and more. Although labor unions have lost a great deal of the economic and political power they once had, and membership has declined, especially in private unions, they still play a significant role in many business sectors in some parts of the country. We often think of union members as workers in the private sector, such as in construction and manufacturing. In fact, public sector labor unions, those employees who work for governments, such as teachers, firefighters, police officers, etc., comprise 7.1 million of the 14.3 million workers in labor unions. Overall union membership in the public sector stands at 33% compared to just 6% in the private sector. Historians generally agree that today's unions are an outgrowth of the economic transition caused by the industrial revolution of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Workers who once toiled in the fields, dependent on the mercies of nature for survival, found themselves relying on the continuous roll of factory presses and assembly lines for their living, making the transition from an agricultural economy to an industrial economy was quite difficult. Over time, workers and businesses learned that strength through unity, unions could lead to improved job conditions, better wages, and job security. Page 313. Today, critics of organized labor maintain that few of the inhumane conditions once dominant in U.S. industry exist in the modern workplace. They argue that organized labor is an industry in itself, and protecting workers has become secondary. Some workplace analysts maintain that the current legal system and changing management philosophies minimize the possibility that sweatshops, workplaces of the late 19th century and 20th centuries, where unsatisfactory, unsafe, or oppressive labor conditions could reappear in the United States. Let's look at the history of labor unions to see how we got to where we are today. Lewis W. Hine and By and Large and Getty Images. While the technological achievements of the Industrial Revolution brought countless new products to market and reduced the need for physical labor in many industries, it also put pressure on workers to achieve higher productivity in factory jobs that called for long hours and low pay. Can you see how these conditions made it possible for labor unions to take hold by the turn of the 20th century? The history of organized labor. Formal labor organizations in the United States date to the time of the American Revolution. As early as 1792, cordwainers, shoemakers, in Philadelphia met to discuss fundamental work, issues of pay, hours, conditions, and job security. Pretty much the same issues that often dominate labor negotiations today. The cordwainers were a craft union, an organization of skilled specialists in a particular craft or trade, typically local or regional. Most craft unions were established to achieve some short-range goal, such as curtailing the use of unpaid convict labor instead of available workers who would need to be paid. Often after attaining their goal, the union disbanded. The situation changed dramatically in the late 19th century with the expansion of the Industrial Revolution in the United States. The Industrial Revolution brought enormous productivity increases gained through mass production and job specialization. That made the United States an economic world power. This growth, however, created problems for workers in terms of productivity expectations, hours of work, wages, job security, and unemployment. Workers were faced with the reality that productivity was vital. Those who failed to produce or who stayed home because they were ill or had family problems lost their jobs. Over time, the increased emphasis on production led firms to expand the hours of work. The length of the average work week in 1900 was 60 hours, but an 80-hour week was not uncommon for some industries. Wages were low and child labor was widespread. Minimum wage laws and unemployment benefits were non-existent, which made periods of unemployment hard on families who earned subsistence wages. The nearby spotlight on small businesses. The nearby spotlight on small business box highlights the severity of these conditions and the infamous tragedy that resulted. Page 314. Open spotlight on small business. The fire that ignited America. On March 25, 1911, a warm spring day in New York City, hundreds of young women between the ages of 13 and 23 were busy at work at the Triangle Shirtwaist Company when the unthinkable happened. The factory owners got a phone call warning them of a fire. The owners escaped, but the workers were not so fortunate. As the fire raged from the 8th floor to the ninth, and then the 10th, the panic-stricken workers tried to race to safety, but they found that a crucial door was locked, trapping them in the fire. It was suggested at a later trial that the door was kept locked to prevent theft. It was suggested at a later trial that the door was kept locked to prevent theft. In the blaze that lasted about 15 minutes, 146 workers were killed. Many of the workers burned to death, while others jumped to their fate, holding their hands with their clothes burning. The fire became the touchstone for organized labor and raised support for changes in the workplace. Science history images and Alamy stock photo. Prior to the tragedy at Triangle Shirtwaist, workers had struck for higher pay, shorter hours. The average work week was often 60 to 80 hours. Safer workplace conditions. Prior to the tragedy at Triangle Shirtwaist, workers had struck for higher pay, shorter hours. The average work week was often 60 to 80 hours, and safer workplace conditions. Unfortunately, public opinion was strongly against them. After the tragedy, the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, now called Workers United, grew in numbers and in public support. Today, labor leaders say that the Triangle Fire is evidence of why labor unions are crucial to maintain workplace balance in the United States. At a ceremony in New York City commemorating the 100th anniversary of the fire in 2015, labor leaders encouraged workers to not let the modern labor movement die. It's hard to imagine that in the 1950s, unions represented 36% of the private sector workers in the United States, compared to just 6.2% today. Sources: Jonathan Lansner. Will pandemic rearrange the workplace like the Triangle Fire did? Orange County Register, ocregister.com, March 25th, 2022. Major American fires, Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, University of Illinois. Guides.library.illinois.edu. Accessed April 2023. Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, Britannica.com, March 12, 2023. The first truly national labor organization was the Knights of Labor, formed by Uriah Smith Stevens in 1869. The Knights offered membership to all private working people, including employers, and promoted social causes as well as labor and economic issues. The organization fell from prominence, however, after being blamed for a bomb that killed 8 police officers during a labor rally at Haymarket Square in Chicago in 1886. A rival group, the American Federation of Labor AFL, was formed that same year. By 1890, the AFL, under the dynamic leadership of Samuel Gompers, stood at the forefront of the labor movement. The AFL was never one big union, but rather an organization of craft unions that championed fundamental labor issues. It intentionally limited membership to skilled workers, craftspeople, assuming they would have better bargaining power than unskilled workers in obtaining concessions from employers. As a federation, its many individual unions can become members, yet keep their separate union status. Over time, an unauthorized AFL group called the Committee of Industrial Organizations began to organize industrial unions which consisted of unskilled and semi-skilled workers in mass production industries such as automobile manufacturing and mining. John L. Lewis, president of the United Mine Workers, led this committee. His objective was to organize both craftspeople and unskilled workers under one banner. When the AFL rejected his proposal in 1935, Lewis broke away to form the Congress of Industrial Organizations, CIO. The CIO soon rivaled the AFL in membership, partly because of the passage of the National Labor Relations Act, also called the Wagner Act, the same year. See the next section. For 20 years, the two organizations struggled for power. It wasn't until the passage of Taft-Hartley Act. It wasn't until the It wasn't until passage of the Taft-Hartley Act in 1947, see Figure 12.1, that they saw the benefits of a merger. In 1955, the two groups formed the AFL-CIO. The AFL-CIO today maintains affiliations with 55 national and international labor unions and has about 12.5 million members. Page 315. Figure 12.1. Major legislation affecting labor management relations. Norris-LaGuardia Act 1932 prohibited courts from issuing injunctions against nonviolent union activities, outlawed contracts forbidding union activities, outlawed the use of yellow dog contracts by employers. Yellow dog contracts were contractual agreements forced on workers by employers whereby the employee agreed not to join a union as a condition of employment. National Labor Relations Act, Wagner Act, 1935, gave employees the right to form or join labor organizations or to refuse to form or join, the right to collectively bargain with employees through elected union representatives, and the right to engage in labor activities such as strikes, picketing, and boycotts, prohibited certain unfair labor practices by the employer and the union, and established the National Labor Relations Board to oversee union election campaigns and investigate labor practices. This act gave great impetus to the union movement. Fair Labor Standards Act 1938 set a minimum wage and maximum basic hours for workers in interstate commerce industries. The first minimum wage was 25 cents an hour, except for farm and retail workers. Labor Management Relations Act, Taft-Hartley Act 1947, amended the Wagner Act, permitted states to pass laws prohibiting compulsory union membership, right-to-work laws, set up methods to deal with strikes that affect national health and safety, prohibited secondary boycotts, closed shop agreements, and feather bedding, the requiring of wage payments for work not performed by unions. This act gave more power to management. Labor Management Reporting and Disclosure Act, Landrum-Griffin Act, 1959, amended the Taft-Hartley Act and the Wagner Act, guaranteed individual rights of union members in dealing with their union, such as the right to nominate candidates for union office, vote in union elections, attend and participate in union meetings, vote on union business, and examine union records and accounts. Required annual financial reports to be filed with the U.S. Department of Labor. One goal of this act was to clean up union corruption. LO 12-2 discussed the major legislation affecting labor unions, labor legislation, and collective bargaining. Much of the growth and influence of organized labor in the United States has depended primarily on two major factors: the law and public opinion. Figure 12.1 outlines 5 major federal laws with a significant impact on the rights and operations of labor unions. Take a few moments to read it before going on. Note that such laws govern private workers. The Norris-LaGuardia Act paved the way for union growth in the United States. This legislation prohibited employers from using employment contracts that included provisions such as a yellow dog contract. A yellow dog contract required employees to agree as a condition of employment not to join a union. The National Labor Relations Act, or Wagner Act, passed 3 years later, provided labor unions with clear legal justification to pursue key issues that were strongly supported by Samuel Gompers and the AFL. One of these issues, collective bargaining, is the process whereby union and management representatives negotiate a contract for workers. The Wagner Act expanded labor's right to collectively bargain by obligating employers to meet at reasonable times and bargain in good faith with respect to wages, hours, and other terms and conditions of employment. Union organizing campaigns. The Wagner Act established an administrative agency discussed in Bonus Chapter A, the National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, to oversee labor management relations. The NLRB consists of 5 members appointed by the U.S. President and is authorized to investigate and remedy unfair labor practices. It also provides workplace guidelines and legal protection to workers seeking to vote on organizing a union to represent them. Certification is the formal process whereby the NLRB recognizes a labor union as the authorized bargaining agent for a group of employees. Decertification is the process by which workers can take away a union's right to represent them. After an election, both the union and company have 5 days to contest the results with the NLRB. Page 316. LO 12-3. Outline the objectives of labor unions. Objectives of organized labor over time. The objectives of labor unions shift with social and economic trends. The negotiated labor management agreement, informally referred to as the labor contract, sets the tone and clarifies the terms and conditions under which management and the union will function over a specific period. Unions attempt to address their most pressing concerns in the labor contract, such as job security, pay, and offshore outsourcing. Negotiations can cover a wide range of topics, and it can take a long time to reach an agreement. Figure 12.2 lists topics commonly negotiated by management and labor. Figure 12.2 Issues in a negotiated labor management agreement. Labor and management often meet to discuss and clarify the terms that specify employees' functions within the company. The topics listed in this figure are typically discussed during these meetings. 1. Management rights. 2. Union recognition. 3. Union security clause. 4. Strikes and lockouts. 5. Union activities and responsibilities. A. Dues checkoff. B. Union bulletin boards. C. Work slowdowns. 6. Wages. A. Wage structure. B. Shift differentials. C. Wage incentives. D. Bonuses. E. Piecework conditions. F. Tiered wage structures. 7. Hours of work and time off policies. A. Regular hours of work, holidays, vacation policies, overtime regulations, leaves of absence, break periods, flex time, mealtime allotments. 8. Job rights and seniority principles, seniority regulations, transfer policies and bumping, promotions, layoffs, and recall procedures, job bidding and posting. 9. Discharge and discipline, suspension, conditions for discharge. 10. Grievance procedures, arbitration, agreement, mediation procedures. 11. Employee benefits, health, and welfare. Page 317. Labor unions generally insist that a contract contain a union security clause stipulating that employees who reap union benefits either officially join or at least pay dues to the union. After passage of the Wagner Act, unions sought strict security in the form of the closed shop agreement, which specified that workers had to be members of a union before being hired for a job. To labor's dismay, the Labor Management Relations Act, Taft-Hartley Act, outlawed this practice in 1947. See Figure 12.3. Figure 12.3. Different forms of union agreements. Closed shop. The Taft-Hartley Act made this form of agreement illegal. Under this type of labor agreement, employers could hire only current union members for a job. Union shop. The majority of labor agreements are of this type. In a union shop, the employer can hire anyone, but as a condition of employment, employees hired must join the union to keep their jobs. Agency shop. Employers may hire anyone. Employees not employees need not join the union, but are required to pay a union fee. A small percentage of labor agreements are of this type. Open shop. Union membership is voluntarily for new and existing employees. Those who don't join the union don't have to pay union dues. Few union contracts are of this type. Today, unions favor the union shop agreement, which under workers do not have to be members of a union to be hired, but must agree to join within a prescribed period, usually 30, 60, or 90 days. However, under a contingency called an agency shop agreement, employers may hire workers who are not required to join the union, but must pay a special union fee or regular union dues. Labor leaders believe that such fees or dues are justified because the union represents all workers in collective bargaining, not just its members. However, in 2018, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that workers who choose not to join a union representing public sector employees cannot be forced to pay union dues. The Taft-Hartley Act recognized the legality of the union shop but granted individual states the power to outlaw such agreements through right-to-work laws. To date, 27 states have passed such legislation. See Figure 12.4. In a right-to-work state, an open shop agreement gives workers the option to join or not to join a union if one exists. In a right-to-work state, a worker who does not join a union cannot be forced to pay a fee or union dues. Page 318. Figure 12.4. States with right-to-work laws. Figure contract negotiations will likely focus on evolving workplace issues such as child and elder care, worker retraining, two-tiered wage plans, drug testing, and other social work-related issues. Job security is sure to remain a top union priority due to job losses from offshore outsourcing and trade agreements. Unions will continue to support federal changes such as increasing the minimum wage to $15 per hour. Critics of proposals to raise the minimum wage say that if it is raised, many workers with limited skills would be priced out of the market and unemployment will increase. Advocates of the minimum wage increase say that the increase is necessary to protect the working poor. What do you think? Resolving labor management disagreements. The negotiated labor management agreement becomes a guide to work relations between management and the union. However, it does not necessarily end negotiations between them because there are sometimes differences concerning interpretations of the agreement. For example, managers may interpret a certain clause in the agreement to mean they are free to select who works overtime. Union members may interpret the same clause to mean that managers must select employees for overtime on the basis of seniority. If the parties cannot resolve such controversies, employees may file a grievance. A grievance is a charge by employees that management is not abiding by or fulfilling the terms of the negotiated labor management agreement as they perceive it. Overtime rules, promotions, layoffs, transfers, and job assignments are generally sources of employee grievances. Handling them demands a good deal of contact between union officials and managers. Grievances, however, do not imply that a company has broken the law or the labor agreement. In fact, the vast majority of grievances are negotiated and resolved by shop stewards, union officials who work permanently in an organization and represent employee interests on a daily basis. a supervisory level managers and supervisory level managers. However, if a grievance is not settled at this level, formal grievance procedures will begin. Figure 12.5 illustrates the steps of a formal grievance procedure could follow. Page 319. Figure 12.5, the grievance resolution process. The grievance process may move through several steps before the issue is resolved. At each step, the issue is negotiated between union officials and managers. If no resolution is achieved, an outside arbitrator may be mutually agreed on. If so, the decision by the arbitrator is binding, legally enforceable. Arbitrator or arbitration panel. National Union Officer, Union Grievance Committee, Local Union Business Manager, Union Shop Steward, Employee Grievance, Corporate Officer, Plant Manager, Labor Relations Manager, Higher Level Manager, Supervisory Manager. No resolution, negotiation, no resolution, negotiation, no resolution, negotiation, no resolution, negotiation. Mediation and arbitration. During the contract negotiation process, there's generally a bargaining zone, which is the range of options between the initial and final offers that each party will consider before negotiations dissolve or reach an impasse. If labor and management negotiators aren't able to agree on alternatives within the bargaining zone, mediation may be necessary. McGraw-Hill Connect, I see it, need help understanding mediation versus arbitration. Click on the video for a brief animated explanation. Mediation is the use of a third party called a mediator who encourages both sides in a labor dispute to continue negotiating and often makes suggestions for resolving the matter. Keep in mind that mediators evaluate facts in the dispute and then make suggestions, not decisions. Elected officials, both current and past, attorneys, and college professors often serve as mediators in labor disputes. The National Mediation Board can provide federal mediators when requested in a labor dispute. The National Football League and the National Hockey League have used the assistance of a federal mediator before agreeing to new contracts after talks stalled. A more extreme option used to resolve conflicts is arbitration. An agreement to bring in an impartial third party, a single arbitrator, or arbitration panel, to render a binding decision in a labor dispute. The arbitrators must be acceptable to both labor and management. You may have heard of professional baseball players filing for arbitration to resolve a contract dispute with their teams or to contest a penalty imposed by the league. Many negotiated labor management agreements in the United States call for the use of arbitration to end labor disputes. The nonprofit American Arbitration Association is the dominant organization used in dispute resolution. Tactics used in labor management conflicts. LO 12-4 describe the tactics used by labor and management during conflicts and discuss the role of unions in the future. If labor and management can't reach an agreement through collective bargaining and negotiations, break down either side or both may use specific tactics to enhance its negotiating position and perhaps sway public opinion. Unions primarily use strikes and boycotts as well as pickets and work slowdowns. Management may implement lockouts and injunctions and even hire strikebreakers. The following sections explain each tactic briefly. Joshua Bessics and AP Images. In December 2021, workers formed a union at a Starbucks in Buffalo, New York, igniting an organization effort that soon spread to stores across the country. Along with protesting working conditions at the company, more than 6,500 staffers at over 250 corporate-owned Starbucks locations have voted to unionize in the years since Buffalo's success. How do you think unionization could benefit both Starbucks and its employees? Union tactics. A strike occurs when workers collectively refuse to go to work. Strikers have been the most potent union tactic. They attract public attention to a labor dispute and can cause operations in a company to slow down or totally cease. Besides refusing to work, strikers may also picket the company, walking around carrying signs and talking with the public and the media about the issues in the dispute. Unions also often use picketing as an informational tool before going on strike. Strikes sometimes lead to the resolution of a labor dispute. However, they also have generated violence and extended bitterness. Often after a strike is finally settled, labor and management remain openly hostile toward each other, and mutual complaints of violations of the negotiated labor management agreement continue. Page 320. Many states prohibit public safety workers, police and firefighters, and teachers from striking, even though they can be unionized. Employees of the federal government, such as postal workers, can unionize, but also denied the right to strike. When strikes are prohibited, however, public sector workers sometimes display their frustrations by engaging in sick outs, often called the blue flu. That is, they arrange as a group to be absent from work and claim illness as the reason. In critical industries such as airlines and railroads, under the Taft-Hartley Act, the U.S. President can ask for a cooling-off period, during which workers return to their jobs while negotiations continue. To prevent a strike, the cooling-off period can last up to 80 days. Unions also attempt boycotts as a means to obtain their objectives in a labor dispute. Boycotts can be classified as primary or secondary. A primary boycott occurs when labor encourages both its members and the general public not to buy the products or services of a firm engaged in a labor dispute. A secondary boycott is an attempt by labor to convince others to stop doing business with a firm that is the subject of a primary boycott. Labor unions can legally authorize primary boycotts. but the Taft-Hartley Act prohibits using secondary boycotts. For example, a union couldn't initiate a secondary boycott against a retail chain because its stores carry products of a company that's the target of a primary boycott. For example, a union couldn't initiate a secondary boycott against a retail chain because its stores carry products of a company that's the target of a primary boycott. Management tactics. Like labor unions, management also uses specific tactics to achieve its workplace goals. A lockout is an attempt by management to put pressure on union workers by temporarily closing the business. When workers don't work, they don't get paid. Management rarely uses this tactic, but many fans remember the high-profile 99-day lockout of the Major League Baseball players imposed by the owners in 2022. Management, however, most often uses injunctions and strike breakers to counter labor demands it sees as excessive. David J. Griffin and Icon Sports Wire and Getty Images. In 2021, a contract dispute between Major League Baseball players and owners resulted in the owners locking the players out of team facilities for months. What effects do you think lockouts have on professional athletes as well as sports fans? An injunction is a court order directing someone to do something or to refrain from doing something. Management has sought injunctions to order striking workers back to work, limit the number of pickets during a strike, or otherwise deal with any actions that could be considered detrimental to the public welfare. For a court to issue an injunction, management must show a just cause, such as possibility of violence or destruction of private property. Employers have had the right to replace striking workers since a 1938 Supreme Court ruling, but this tactic was used infrequently until the 1980s. Since then, the use of strike breakers has been employed and has become a particular source of hostility and sometimes violence in labor relations. Strike breakers, called scabs by unions, are workers hired to do the jobs of striking employees until the labor dispute is resolved. Be sure to read the Making Ethical Decisions box, which deals with this issue, and make your decision. Page 321. Making Ethical Decisions. Walking a Fine Line. Your wallet is almost empty, and bills for college expenses, food, phone, and other expenses keep piling up. You read last weekend that Shop Till You Drop, a local grocery chain in your town, is looking for workers to replace striking members of United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, International Union. The workers are striking because of a reduction in health insurance benefits and reduced payment to their pensions. Several classmates at your college are UFCW members employed at Shop Till You Drop stores, and many other students at your college are supporting the strike. These stores also employ many people from the neighborhood whose families depend on the income and benefits. Shop Till You Drop argues the company made a fair offer to the union workers, but with the increasing cost of health care and other benefits, the workers' demands are excessive and could force the company into bankruptcy. Shop Till You Drop is offering replacement workers an attractive wage rate and flexible schedules to cross the picket line and work during the strike. The company has even suggested the possibility of permanent employment depending on the results of the strike. As a struggling student, you could use the job and the money for tuition and other expenses. Will you cross the picket line and apply? What could be the consequences of your decision? Is your choice ethical? The future of unions and labor-management relations. Organized labor continues at a crossroads. As noted earlier, 6.2% of workers in the private sector are unionized, and nearly half of all union members work in the public sector. With union membership varying considerably by state, see Figure 12.6. Once powerful unions like the United Auto Workers, UAW, have lost almost three-fourths of their membership since 1979, unions today are quite different from those in the past when manufacturing, transportation, and construction had a large share of the workforce and were unionized. Today, the largest union in the United States is the National Education Association, NEA, with over 3 million members. The Service Employees International Union, SEIU, with 2 million members is second. You might note that the NEA is a public sector union and the SEIU's focus is on services. To grow, unions will have to include more people in professional and administrative jobs, females and foreign-born workers. The traditional base that unions depended on for growth needs to give way to organizing efforts in industries like healthcare, over 16 million workers, and information technology, over 4 million workers. Perhaps what's even more concerning to labor unions is that union membership is highest among workers 45 to 64 years old and lowest among workers 18 to 25 years old. Figure 12.6, Union Membership by State. Source, Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS.gov, accessed March 2020. Page 322. Both public and private sector union members face challenges as they try to maintain remaining wage and fringe benefit gains achieved in past negotiations. With dwindling numbers, private sector unions need to take on a new role in partnering with management and training workers, redesigning jobs, and assimilating members to the job requirements of the knowledge work economy. Growing use of robotics and AI will test unions' relations with management. How organized labor handles these challenges may well define the future for labor unions. After the test prep, we will look at other workplace issues facing employees and managers today. Test prep. What are the major laws that affected union growth, and what does each one cover? How do changes in the economy affect the objectives of unions? What are the major tactics used by unions and by management to assert their power in contract negotiations? What types of workers do unions need to organize in the future? Controversial employee management issues, LO 12-5. Assess some of today's controversial employee management issues, such as executive compensation, pay equity, sexual harassment, child care and elder care, substance use disorders and drug testing, and violence, and bullying in the workplace. Today, many questions persist concerning businesses' responsibilities to provide workers with certain benefits and assurances. Employees are raising questions of fairness, income equality, and workplace security. Let's take a look at several key workplace issues, starting with executive compensation. Executive compensation. Soccer star Lionel Messi kicks and dribbles his way to $130 million a year. Brad Pitt acts his way to $100 million a year. Taylor Swift sings her way to $92 million a year. And Tyler Perry writes, acts, and directs his way to $175 million a year. Is it out of line Then for Jamie Dimon, chair and CEO of JP Morgan Chase Bank, to make $88 million a year, explained that the U.S. free market system is built on incentives that allow top executives to make such large amounts or more. Today, however, the government, stockholders, unions, and employees are challenging this principle and arguing that executive compensation has gotten out of line. In fact, the average total CEO compensation has increased by 940% since 1978, while average worker pay has increased by only 12% in 2022. Median CEO salary, bonuses, and incentives at a major company were $14.4 million, compared to just $72,000 for the average worker. Page 323. In theory, CEO compensation and bonuses are determined by the firm's profitability or an increase in its stock price. The logic of this assumption was that the fortunes of a company and its stockholders grew, so would the rewards of the CEO. Today, however, executives generally receive stock options, the ability to buy company stock at a set price at a later date, and restricted stock issued directly to the CEO that can't be sold, usually for 3 or 4 years, included as part of their compensation. Today, stock and stock options account for over 50% of a CEO's compensation. What's even more frustrating to those who question how much chief executives are paid is that CEOs are often rewarded richly even if their company doesn't meet expectations or if they leave under pressure. Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav was paid $246 million in compensation even though the company's stock price fell by 60%. Many CEOs are also awarded large retainers, consulting contracts, and lavish perks when they retire, or sometimes even when they are replaced. The late management guru Peter Drucker suggested that company CEOs shouldn't make more than 20 times the average salary at their company. Noted economist Thomas Piketty agrees and believes this income inequality is harmful and unnecessary. Unfortunately, not many companies agree with Drucker and Piketty, and few have placed such limits on executive compensation. Today, the average CEO of a Fortune 500 company makes over 324 times the average salary of workers in that same company. Some pay differences can be staggering. For example, whereas restaurants, retail, and service workers push for a national minimum wage of $15 an hour, CEOs in those industries have huge pay packages. Consider that it takes less than a day for Walgreens CEO Rosalind Brewer to make a typical employee's annual salary. Randy Shropshire and Getty Images Entertainment and Getty Images. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy earned more than $212 million in 2021. While the average Amazon delivery driver made $18 an hour. Corporate boards of directors determine how much executives get paid, including lucrative perks like stock options. Do you think this is a fair system of compensation for CEOs? Do you think workers should have input? As global competition intensifies, executive paychecks in Europe have increased, but European CEOs typically earn considerably less than what U.S. CEOs make in some European countries, such as Germany, according to a system called Social Partnerschaft. Social partnerships. Workers have a say in company management and are entitled to seats on the board of directors of major firms. Since boards set executive pay, this could be a reason why pay imbalances are less in Germany. This process, known as co-determination, calls for cooperation between management and workers in decision-making. It's unlikely a similar system would be acceptable in the United States. Government and shareholder pressure for full disclosure or executive compensation has put U.S. boards of directors on notice that they aren't there simply to enrich CEOs or themselves. The passage of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act was intended to give shareholders more say in compensation decisions and required more information about executive pay packages compared to pay for average workers. Still, it's important to remember that most U.S. executives are responsible for multi-billion-dollar corporations, work 70-plus hours a week, and often travel excessively. Many have turned potential problems at companies into success and reaped huge benefits for employees and stockholders as well as themselves. Furthermore, there are few seasoned, skilled professionals who can manage large companies, especially troubled companies looking for the right CEO to accomplish a turnaround. There's no easy answer to the question of what's fair compensation for executives, but it's a safe bet the controversy won't go away. Pay equity. The Equal Pay Act of 1963 requires companies to give equal pay to all genders who do the same job. For example, it's illegal to pay a female nurse less than a male nurse unless factors such as seniority, shift differentials, merit pay, or performance incentives are involved. But pay equity goes beyond the concept of equal pay for equal work. It says people in jobs that require similar levels of education, training, or skills should receive equal pay. Pay equity compares the value of a job, like a hairstylist or a librarian, traditionally jobs held by more females than males, with jobs like a plumber or welder, traditionally jobs held by more males than females. Such a comparison shows that jobs typically held by females tend to pay less, sometimes much less. This disparity caused a brief reconsideration of a 1980 concept called comparable worth that suggested people in jobs requiring similar levels of education, training, or skills should receive equal pay. Evidence didn't support that comparable worth would lead to better market equilibrium, only more chaos and iniquity. In the United States today, women earn 83.7% of what men earn, although the disparity varies by profession, job experience, and tenure, level of education, age, location, and other factors. In the past, the primary explanation for this disparity was that women worked only 50 to 60% of their available years once they left school, whereas men normally worked all those years. This explanation doesn't have substance today because fewer women leave the workforce for an extended time. Page 324. Today, women are competing financially with men in fields such as law, financial management, healthcare, biotechnology, information technology, and other knowledge-based jobs. Younger women are faring better than older women financially due to academic achievement. Women under 30 earn at least as much or more than men in strong job markets that attract young, educated people looking to build a career. Today, 48% of women hold at least a bachelor's degree compared to 41% of men. Women also earn almost 60% of the master's degrees awarded and also earn more doctoral degrees than men. However, even though more women are earning advanced business degrees, the wage gap begins to widen in their early 30s when they become underrepresented in managerial jobs. Many workplace analysts suggest transparency in pay practices, which reveals how wages and salaries are set and how pay raises and bonuses are determined, assists in solving pay equity questions. Companies including Target, Johnson & Johnson, PepsiCo, and Microsoft have committed to reviewing their hiring and promotion practices to protect against any pay or promotion disparities. Still, Harvard economics professor Claudia Golden, a longtime scholar on gender and pay, found that many companies tend to give larger financial rewards to managers that log the longest hours and are willing to job hop often. Unfortunately, women who tend to pull back for child rearing or caregiving fall behind and never catch up. Women, especially women with children, still earn less, are less likely to go into business, and are more likely to live in poverty than men. There's no question that pay equity promises to remain a challenging employee management issue. See the Adapting to Change box that discusses a step forward for women in pay equity in professional sports. Page 325, Adapting to Change, Kicking Up the Ante. In 2019, the U.S. women's national soccer team, USWNT, won its second consecutive World Cup in France. This victory, paired with gold and bronze medals in the previous two Olympics, made the team the toast of the U.S. soccer world. Many of its players, such as Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgan, were fast becoming social icons along with fellow teammates. The women's team was considerably more successful and popular than the men's team. It seemed that the USWNT had everything going for them, everything that is, with the exception of one major thing: paychecks. In an unprecedented move, the entire team filed a lawsuit demanding equal pay along with comparable work conditions as the U.S. men's team. The key argument the USWNT stressed was they played the same game as the men, and according to the Equal Pay Act of 1963, men and women who perform the same job deserve the same pay. After 3 years of numerous depositions, criticisms of women's skills compared to the men's team, and many meetings with attorneys, the U.S. Soccer Federation came to a landmark agreement with the USWNT. It would pay the men's and women's teams the same amount and divide the combined women's and men's World Cup prize money equally between the two teams. The USWNT would also receive a $24 million settlement agreement. Andrew Hancock and ISI Photos and Getty Images Sport and Getty Images. According to team captain Megan Rapinoe, the team refused to accept anything other than what they believed they deserved. Last year, the persistence and hard work started to pay off. The USWNT earned more money when the men's team reached the knockout stages of the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. Than the women earned from winning the Women's World Cup in 2015 and 2019 combined. It should be noted the USMNT men's team strongly supported the efforts of the USWNT for equal pay. The USWNT's success has created momentum across the women's sport spectrum. The NCAA women's basketball tournament has expanded with increased NCAA funding and an upgrade in training facilities for the tournament. The WNBA, Women's National Basketball Association, has boosted league marketing expenditures to expand the scope of the women's game, and the Ladies Professional Golf Association has increased prize money by over 30%. Globally, the Canadian national women's team, CNWT, won equal pay with the nation's men's team. The French national women's team is still fighting for the same benefits won by the USWNT. Hopefully, the 2023 Women's World Cup will finally be a battle of the world's best teams on the field, and not a battle for financial fairness. Sources: Nancy Armour and Lindsay Schnell. Leaving it better for the next generation. U.S. women's soccer team on winning fights for equal pay. U.S. Today. USA, USA Today, usatoday.com. March 17th, 2023, Jen Lim, a status update on equal pay, Yahoo Sports, yahoo.sports.com. March 14th, 2023, Owen Poindexter, Canadian women's soccer team reaches equal pay agreement. Front Office Sports, frontofficesports.com. March 5th, 2023, Amy Woodyat, We couldn't lose. Megan Rapinoe reflects on feeling desperate and fight for equal pay. CNN, CNN.com, March 8th, 2023. Sexual harassment. Sexual harassment refers to unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical contact conduct of a sexual nature that creates a hostile work environment. The Civil Rights Act of 1991 governs sexual harassment of all genders. In 1997, the Supreme Court reinforced this fact when it said same-sex harassment also falls within the purview of sexual harassment law. Today, managers and workers are much more sensitive to sexual comments and behavior than they were in the past. Almost 80% of the sexual harassment claims reported are filed by women. Conduct on the job can be considered illegal under specific conditions. An employee's submission to such conduct is explicitly or implicitly made a term or condition of employment, or an employee's submission to or rejection of such conduct is used as the basis for employment decisions affecting the worker's status. A threat like, "Go out with me," or "You're fired," or "Go out with me," or "You'll never be promoted here," constitutes quid pro quo sexual harassment. The conduct unreasonably interferes with a worker's job performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. This type of harassment is hostile work environment sexual harassment. Antonio Perez and Chicago Tribune and Tribune News Service and Getty Images. Unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct are prohibited under the Civil Rights Act of 1991. The Me Too movement brought further attention to these important issues after a number of prominent media figures were accused of harassment. What should companies do to reduce the risk of sexual misconduct in the workplace? The Supreme Court broadened the scope of what can be considered a hostile work environment. The key word seemed to be unwelcome, a term for behavior that would offend a reasonable person. Companies and individuals have found that sexual harassment can be costly and can lead to the fall of top leadership at the company. In a highly publicized case that became a popular movie title, Bombshell, 21st Century Fox paid TV journalist Gretchen Carlson $20 million to settle sexual harassment charges against the late Fox News chief Roger Ailes. Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, was forced to resign his office after charges of sexual harassment against him surfaced. Foreign companies doing business in the United States are also not immune to sexual harassment charges, as both Toyota and Nissan discovered. The number of reports of sexual harassment and assault in the military and at the military academies has risen sharply in recent years. A key problem is that workers and page 326. A key problem is that workers and managers often know a policy concerning sexual harassment exists, but have no idea exactly what it says or exactly what's involved. To remedy this, several states have taken the lead. California, Connecticut, Maine, Delaware, New York, and Illinois require companies to provide sexual harassment prevention training to supervisors and employees. Most states require sexual harassment training only for employees in the government sector. Workers at small businesses often don't receive training regarding sexual harassment, even though online tutorials are readily available. Fortunately, many companies today have responded proactively and established rapid, effective grievance procedures and reacted promptly when allegations of harassment are raised. Such efforts may save businesses millions of dollars in lawsuits and make the workplace more productive and harmonious. Nonetheless, as high-profile cases in the past few years have shown, there's a long way to go before sexual harassment as a key employee management issue disappears. Childcare. Today, women make up the majority of the workforce in the United States. Approximately three-fourths of women with children under 18, including over two-thirds of mothers with children under age 6, are in the workforce. Such statistics concern employers for two reasons. One, absences related to child care cost U.S. businesses billions of dollars annually, and two, the issue of who should pay for employee child care raises a question that often divides employees. Many coworkers oppose child care benefits for parents or other primary caregivers, arguing that single workers and single income families shouldn't subsidize child care. Others contend that employers and the government have the responsibility to create child care systems to assist employees. Unfortunately, federal assistance hasn't increased since passage of the Welfare Reform Act many years ago. In 2022, Congress rejected the president's proposal that the government subsidized child care costs for families. Government help looks doubtful. This creates problems for many employees since the child care bill for a two-child household can't exceed the cost of rent. Thus, child care remains an important workplace issue. Ted S. Warren and AP Images. On-site daycare is still a relatively uncommon employee benefit in the United States today. Although it's often expensive to operate, it can pay big dividends in employee satisfaction and productivity. Who should pay for employee benefits like child care and elder care, the employee or the company? A number of large companies offer child care as an employee benefit. Home Depot, Johnson & Johnson, and Disney offer on-site child care and have been praised as particularly sympathetic and cooperative by working mothers. Other large firms with extensive child care programs include Aflac, Microsoft, and Google. Japanese automaker Toyota has provided 24-hour child care at its plants in Kentucky and Indiana for many years. Some additional child care benefits provided by employers include discount arrangements with national child care chains, vouchers that offer payments toward child care the employee selects, referral services that help identify high quality child care facilities to employees, on-site child care centers at which parents can visit children at lunch or during lag times throughout the workday, sick child centers to care for moderately ill children. Unfortunately, small business with fewer than 100 employees can't compete with big companies in providing assistance with child care to compound problems. Since COVID-19 pandemic, when child care centers were closed, it's been extremely difficult for child care providers to find workers. There are about 58,000 fewer workers since the pandemic took hold in 2020, and recruitment has been very slow. Some child care facilities have a waiting list of 300 families. The economy is suffering from a shortage of workers due to the shortage of available child care. Page 327. With large numbers of two-income households and over 12 million single-parent households in the United States, child care is sure to remain a key employee management issue. even as businesses and employees face another growing challenge, the issue of elder care. Elder care. Currently, there are approximately 56.4 million Americans over the age of 65. Over the next 20 years, the number of Americans over 65 is expected to grow to over 80 million. That will be approximately 22% of the US population in 2040. The likelihood that an American aged 65 will live to 85 has also increased significantly. What this means is that many workers will be confronted with how to care for older parents and other relatives. Today in the United States, over 43 million family caregivers provide unpaid care to an older person. Over 75% of those caregivers report that they needed to make some work accommodations due to their caregiving responsibilities. According to the MetLife Mature Market Institute, such caregiving obligations cause employees to miss approximately 15 million days of work per year, costing companies an estimated $34 billion a year in reduced productivity, absenteeism, and turnover from employees responsible for aging relatives. Elder care is a key workplace issue. The U.S. Office of Personnel Management, OPM, suggests that employees with responsibilities to care for older people need information about medical, legal, and insurance issues, as well as the full support of their supervisors and company. The OPM also says such caregivers may require flex time, part-time employment, job sharing, or at-home work. Many firms have responded and now offer employee assistance programs. JP Morgan Chase provides elder care management services that include a needs assessment program for the employee. Consulting firm Deloitte offers paid leave up to 16 weeks for employees providing elder care. UPS offers health spending accounts in which employees can put aside pre-tax income for elder care expenses. However, the number of companies offering elder care benefits still lags behind the number of offering child care benefits, and small businesses are far behind large companies in providing elder care benefits. Unfortunately, the government does not provide much relief. Both Medicare and Medicaid place heavy financial burdens for care on family caregivers. According to the American Association of Retired Persons, AARP, as more experienced and high-ranking employees care for older parents and relatives, the costs to companies will rise even higher. This argument makes sense, since older, more experienced workers who are most affected by elder care issues often hold jobs more critical to a company than those held by younger workers. Many firms now face the fact that transfers and promotions are often out of the question for employees whose older parents or relatives need ongoing care. Unfortunately, as the nation gets older, the elder care situation will grow considerably worse, meaning this employee management issue will persist well into the future. Substance use disorders and drug testing. Substance use disorders, which encompass both alcohol use and drug use disorders, remain serious workplace issues that touch many workers and stretch from factory floors to construction sites to the locker rooms of professional sports teams. Alcohol is the most widely used drug in the workplace, with an estimated 6.4% of full-time U.S. employees believed to have an alcohol use disorder. Approximately 40% of industrial injuries and fatalities can be linked to alcohol consumption. According to the Department of Health and Human Services Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, more than 8% of full-time workers aged 18 to 49 use illegal drugs. In some industries, such as food services and construction, the percentage of workers using illegal drugs is much higher. Page 328. The U.S. Department of Labor estimates that individuals who use illegal drugs are 3.5 times more likely to be in workplace accidents and 5 times more likely to file a workers' compensation claim than other employees. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, employees who use illegal drugs cost their employers about twice as much in medical and workers' compensation claims as do their drug-free coworkers. The U.S. Department of Labor projects that over a one-year period, substance use disorders cost the U.S. economy $820 billion in lost work, healthcare costs, crime, traffic accidents, and other expenses, and over $120 billion in lost productivity. The National Institutes of Health estimates each employee with a substance use disorder can cost an employer approximately $10,000 annually. These employees are associated with 55% of on-the-job accident rates. These employees are associated with 55% of on-the-job accident rates, 85% more injuries, 10% higher absenteeism, 30% more turnover, and more frequent workplace violence incidents. The Home Depot. Notice we test all applicants for illegal drug use. If you use drugs, don't bother to apply. Tim Boyle and Getty Images News and Getty Images. Today, over 60% of major companies drug test new employees, and many other conduct random drug testing. Do you think these efforts are successful in reducing substance use disorders in the workplace? Why or why not? Today, over 60% of major companies drug test new employees, even though many now question the testing's effectiveness in improving safety or productivity. Furthermore, 37 states and the District of Columbia have passed laws legalizing marijuana in some form, which complicates the testing issue. It's safe to say the issues of substance use disorders and drug testing will remain important and controversial employee management issues in the future. It's safe to say the issues of substance use disorders and drug testing will remain important and controversial employee management issues in the future. Violence and bullying in the workplace. The school shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary School shocked the nation. The tragedy also reminded businesses that even though workplace violence has declined over the past 30 years, the threat has in no way disappeared. Employers and managers must be vigilant about potential violence in the workplace. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that nearly 2 million Americans are impacted by workplace violence annually. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, reports that homicides account for 9% of all workplace deaths and are the number one cause of death for women in the workplace, accounting for 19%. Many companies have taken action to prevent problems before they occur. They have held focus groups that invite employee input, hired managers with strong interpersonal skills, and employed skilled consultants to deal with any growing potential for workplace violence. In many states, employers can seek a temporary restraining order on behalf of workers experiencing threats or harassment. Such initiatives have helped curtail workplace violence. Unfortunately, as workplace violence has decreased, workplace bullying has increased. According to the Workplace Bullying Institute, WBI, bullying at work involves repeated health-harming mistreatment of a person by one or more perpetrators. It is abusive conduct that is threatening, humiliating, or intimidating, or work interference or sabotage which prevents work from getting done, or verbal abuse. The WBI maintains bullying is almost 4 times more common than sexual harassment on the job. Zogby International Research estimates that 35% of workers have been bullied at work. Unfortunately, employers and managers often discount or deny bullying and refer to it simply as personality conflicts or management styles. By trivializing bullying, an organization can suffer reduced employee morale and productivity, increased turnover, and in some cases, even legal problems. Although schoolyard bullying tends to be physical in nature, workplace bullying involves more psychological and verbal abuse. Also, the targets of workplace bullying are often the strongest employees, who are considered threats to the bully, not the weakest. The majority of bullies are supervisors or managers, but can also be fellow workers. Men far outnumber women as workplace bullies, but women tend to bully other women more frequently than men. Cyberbullying does not involve face-to-face contact in bullying others, but rather involves the use of digital technology to abuse or threaten others. Bullying is increasingly becoming a major problem in the workplace and can be directed at employees at all levels of the organization. Firms that have healthy employee management relations have a better chance to prosper than those that don't. Taking a proactive approach is the best way to ensure positive employee management work environments. The proactive manager anticipates potential sensitive issues and works toward resolving them before they get out of hand. A good lesson for any manager: test prep. How does top executive pay in the United States compare with top executive pay in other countries? What's the difference between pay equity and equal pay for equal work? How is the term sexual harassment defined, and when does sexual behavior become illegal? What are some of the issues companies are facing related to childcare and elder care? How are companies addressing those issues? How can companies effectively address workplace violence and bullying? Summary: LO 12-1. Trace the history of organized labor in the United States. What was the first union? The cordwainers, shoemakers, organized a craft union of skilled specialists in 1792. The Knights of Labor, formed in 1869, was the first national labor organization. How did the AFL-CIO evolve? The American Federation of Labor, AFL, formed in 1886, was an organization of craft unions. The Congress of Industrial Organizations, CIO, a group of unskilled and semi-skilled workers, broke off from the AFL in 1935. Over time, the two organizations saw the benefits of joining and became the AFL-CIO in 1955. The AFL-CIO is a federation of labor unions, not a national union. LO 12-2. Discuss the major legislation affecting labor unions. What are the provisions of the major legislation affecting labor unions? See Figure 12.1. LO 12-3. Outline the objectives of labor unions. What topics typically appear in labor management agreements? See Figure 12.2, page 330. LO 12-4. Describe the tactics used by labor and management during conflicts and discuss the role of unions in the future. What are the tactics used by unions and management in conflicts? Unions can use strikes and boycotts. Management can use strike breakers, injunctions, and lockouts. What will unions have to do to cope with continually declining membership? Unions are facing a changing workplace. The National Education Association is now the nation's largest union. The Service Employees International Union, SEIU, with 2 million members, is the second largest union. Going forward, unions must adapt to an increasingly professional and administrative, female and culturally diverse workforce. To help keep U.S. businesses competitive in global markets, many have taken on a new role in assisting management and training workers, redesigning jobs, and assimilating the changing workforce. LO 12-5. Assess some of today's controversial employee management issues, such as executive compensation, pay equity, sexual harassment, child care and elder care, substance use disorders and drug testing, and violence and bullying in the workplace. What is a fair wage for managers? The market and the businesses in it set managers' salaries. What is fair is open to debate. How are equal pay and pay equity different? The Equal Pay Act of 1963 provides that workers receive equal pay for equal work, with exceptions for seniority, merit, or performance. Pay equity is the demand for equivalent pay for jobs requiring similar levels of education, training, and skills. How are some companies addressing the childcare issue? Responsive companies are providing childcare on the premises. Emergency care. Responsive companies are providing childcare on the premises. Emergency care. Responsive companies are providing childcare on the premises. Emergency care when scheduled care is interrupted. Discounts with childcare chains. Vouchers to be used at the employee's chosen care center, and referral services. What is elder care, and what problems do companies face with regard to this growing problem? Workers who need to provide elder care for dependent parents or others are generally more experienced and vital to the mission of the organization than younger workers are. The cost to business is very large and growing. Why are more and more companies now testing workers and job applicants for substance use disorders? Substance use disorders cost the U.S. economy $820 billion in lost work, healthcare costs, crime, traffic accidents, and other expenses, and over $120 billion in lost productivity. Individuals who use illegal drugs are 3.5 times more likely to be in workplace accidents and 5 times more likely to file a workers' compensation claim than those who do not use them. Why do managers need to be vigilant concerning violence and bullying in the workplace? Nearly 2 million workers are impacted by workplace violence yearly. Companies have been successful in taking action to protect against violence. Unfortunately, bullying in the workplace is growing. Page 331. Key terms. Agency shop agreement, American Federation of Labor, AFL, arbitration, bargaining zone, certification, closed shop agreement, collective bargaining, Congress of Industrial Organizations, CIO, cooling off period, craft union, decertification, grievance, industrial unions, injunction, nights of labor, lockout, mediation, negotiated labor management agreement, labor contract, open shop agreement, primary boycott, right to work laws, secondary boycott, sexual harassment, shop stewards, strike breakers, union security clause, union shop agreements, yellow dog contract. Critical thinking. Do you believe that union shop agreement violations of a worker's freedom of choice in the workplace? Do you believe that union shop agreement violations of a worker's freedom of choice in the workplace? Do you think open shop agreements unfairly penalize workers who pay dues to unions that have elected to represent them in the workplace? Some college football and basketball coaches earn huge incomes. Should college volleyball and swimming coaches be paid comparably? Should players in the Women's National Basketball Association, WNBA, be paid the same as their male counterparts in the National Basketball Association, NBA? What role should market forces and government play in determining such wages? 3. If a company provides employer-paid child care services, do workers with children if a company provides employer-paid child care services to workers with children, should those who don't have children or don't need child care services be paid extra? Putting principles to work. Purpose: to understand why workers choose to join unions and how unions have made differences in certain industries. Exercise: visit the AFL-CIO website, aflcio.org, and find information about why workers join unions and what the benefits have been. 1. Explain how union membership has affected members of ethnic or racial minority groups, women, older workers, and part-time workers. 2. The AFL-CIO site presents the union's perspective on labor issues. Look at the key issues and check sources such as National Right to Work, Legal Defense Foundation, nrtw.org that support management's perspectives and compare their positions on these issues. Page 332, Developing Career Skills, Key, Team Analytic Communication and Technology. 1. Check whether your state supports the right of public employees, police, firefighters, teachers, to unionize and collectively bargain. If not, should such workers be allowed to strike? 2. Evaluate the following statement. Labor unions are dinosaurs that have outlived their usefulness in today's knowledge-based economy. 2. Evaluate the following statement. Labor unions are dinosaurs that have outlived their usefulness in today's knowledge-based economy. After your evaluation, take the position on this statement that differs from your own point of view and defend that position. Be sure to consider such questions as, do unions serve a purpose in some industries? Do unions make the United States less competitive in global markets? 3. Research federal and state legislation related to child care, parental leave, and elder care benefits for employees. Are specific trends emerging? Should companies be responsible for providing such workplace benefits, or should the government share some responsibility? Why? 4. Compile a list of 2 or 3 employee management issues not covered in the chapter. Compare your lists with those of several classmates and see which issues you selected in common and which are unique to each individual. Pick an issue you all agree will be important in the future and discuss its likely effects and outcomes. 5. Do businesses and government agencies have a duty to provide additional benefits to employees beyond fair pay and good working conditions? Propose a system you consider fair and equitable for employees and employers. Career exploration. If you are interested in pursuing a career in employee management relations, here are a few to consider. Find out about the tasks performed, skills needed, pay and opportunity outlook in these fields in the Occupational Outlook Handbook, OOH, at bls.gov. Labor Relations Specialist interprets and administers labor contracts regarding issues such as wages and salaries, healthcare, pensions, and union and management practices. Human Resource Specialist recruits, screens, interviews, and places workers, handles other human resource work such as those related to employee relations, compensation and benefits, and training. Arbitrator and mediator facilitates negotiation and dialogue between disputing parties to help resolve conflicts outside of court. Video case, McGraw-Hill Connect, working with unions at Freeman because the number of workers in labor unions has declined dramatically over the years. You may be under the impression that unions aren't important today, or that they have lost their passion for seeking fair treatment for workers. Not true. Although not all workers are members of labor unions, you probably encounter more union employees than you think. Of course, large numbers of truck drivers and construction workers belong to unions. However, actors, writers, and directors in the entertainment industry are union members too. Even many college professors belong to a union. Freeman XP, a brand experience company, organizes large events such as trade shows, much like a large contractor on a construction site. It is Freeman's job to act as a general contractor for trade shows that are often complex in scope. The company coordinates all the vendors involved in an event and must make sure that all needed equipment, including high-tech devices, is working properly and available to show participants when needed. To accomplish this task, Freeman relies on the assistance of many different labor unions. Union workers help make the trade show happen. In a typical trade show, teamsters deliver and unload all the equipment into the building. Carpenters build the main structures, while electricians make sure power is running throughout the entire show space and lighting is functioning where and when needed. In specific events such as restaurant shows, plumbers must supply water for demonstrations and ensure drainage for used water. Along with these construction-related union workers, Freeman also needs the services of the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, stagehands, to set up sounds, video equipment, and special lighting. On a large-scale trade show, Freeman may easily rely on the work of 6 to 10 different labor unions to get the event fully operational. Freeman believes a key benefit of using union workers is that no matter where it is setting up, the company can count on trained workers who have these necessary skills to make the show work from start to finish. Also, because Freeman sets up shows in many large convention venues throughout the United States, having skilled workers available when needed is vital. In fact, many large trade shows often require hundreds of workers to put together the event. To keep that many people permanently on the company payroll year-round would be cost prohibitive for Freeman. By working with labor unions, the company can hire the needed workers for a limited period. Page 333. Unfortunately, the company admits working with labor unions is not always a bed of roses. Union workers can be costly because their leadership works hard to get their members fair wages and safe working conditions. Labor unions also have different work rules pertaining to start and quit times, breaks, and voluntary versus involuntary overtime rules. Still, despite these challenges, Freeman believes that working with labor unions solves more problems than it creates. It's safe to say that not all companies in the United States feel the same. Unions today are gathering momentum in non-traditional professions like nursing and teaching. They are also gaining support in low-paying jobs like fast food, where the push is on for more equitable wages. Thinking it over. 1. Why does Freeman use so many union workers? What are advantages and disadvantages of using union workers for Freeman? Describe how managing a project, such as a trade show, would be different if Freeman did not use union workers. 2. One of the primary concerns of traditional labor unions, such as the steel workers, is the use of offshore outsourcing. Do you think American companies should be required to use steel that's made in the United States on major projects? 3. How has the government impacted the growth and stability of labor unions? Is your state a right-to-work state? Are there many union workers in your own town or state? Do you see labor unions gaining strength or declining in your state in the future? Page 334, page 335. Notes. Part 5, Marketing, Developing, and Implementing Customer-Oriented Marketing Plans. Chapter 13, Marketing, Helping Buyers Buy, page 336.